There's a detour near my house and it's basically just really annoying because it used to be just a straight road and now it's a whole extra 5 minutes of cutting and curving through a neighborhood. It's just a lot. It's really out of the way and just annoying to do. Anyways, after reading Acts 27, that's the detour that popped into my head. And I just thought, in this life, we create these type of detours for ourselves. The Lord would give us a solution, but because of our disobedience and us feeling like we know everything, we decided to take our own way, even though we could have taken the straight path if we really wanted to. This little digital diary is going to be based on Acts 27. At this time, Paul is on a ship heading to Rome to do his final hearing in front of Caesar. He's on a ship with all the other prisoners and the crew. On the way there's a whole lot of disruptions. They're facing so many problems with the weather and it's just not looking good for their journey ahead. We'll start in Acts 27, chapter 10. Paul says, "Men, I believe that there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives." But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, further up in the coasts of Crete, and spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbor with only a southwest and northwest exposure. So immediately, Paul was very spirit-led. So he told them, "Hey, it's not looking good. Maybe we should stop for a little bit." But the captain immediately was like, "No, I'm not going to listen to you." Basically, Paul's opinion was irrelevant. Paul's opinion was irrelevant to him. Another reason why they didn't stop was they didn't want to stop at a place where they would be cold or they would suffer through the winter, and they wanted to stop in a place where it would be a little bit more comfortable to stay. So because of their comfortability, they decided to carry on their trip and stop somewhere else. So basically forcing it at this point, that didn't work out very well in their favor. As we go down to verse 13, there was a whole lot of struggles that they faced. It literally went downhill from there. Acts 27 verse 13, it says, "When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up an anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength burst across the island and blew up out to the sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the sheltered side of the small island in Kuta, where with great difficulty we hoisted across the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They were afraid of being driven across the sand off to the African coast, so they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars, until at last all hope was gone." So, as you can see, what Paul had told them had come to pass. They went through a lot. There was a lot of suffering. They were just not really sure what was to come, to the point where they literally gave up and was just like, nah, it's not looking good. It's DH. We might as well give up. They literally threw all their belongings off board. They did everything they could to overcome this storm, but it got to the point where they were literally just sitting in darkness. Do you know how scary that would be? I personally hate boats, so to think that I would be sitting in darkness in the middle of the sea, absolutely not. We'll finish it off and then I'll explain the revelation I got from this. In verse 21, it says, "No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, 'Men, you should have listened to me in the first place. You would have avoided all this damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. And he said, "Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said." Okay, so basically they could have avoided all of that suffering if they had just listened to Paul from the beginning. And if I just apply that to my life, the amount of times the Lord has just told me, do it, do this, not even just do this, don't do that. Because I have free will, I do whatever I want and not what the Lord wants. I go through a whole lot of extra stuff that I shouldn't have gone through just to reach the destination. And that's through God's will. It's literally through God's will that these people were able to still get out of that alive. But because they had Paul and Albert praying for them, they were able to get through regardless of their disobedience. And I just want us to take take note that the Lord isn't always going to get us through the consequences of our disobedience. You've chose that route even though the Lord told you to go a different route from the beginning. These people decided to do their own thing, take their own way, use a route that was more comfortable to them. And because they chose that comfortable route, they suffered. Yeah, that's it for my little digital diary. I just wanted to talk about what I got out of this. And I just feel like there's a lot of times we exercise our free will in the wrong way. The Lord gives us free will, but he still calls us to obedience and to have faith in him that he will see us through in difficult situations. It might not seem as if the Lord's way is the right way at that particular time, but you won't fully understand that until you get through it, until you're able to look back and think, actually, I'm glad I did it God's way. So anyways, I pray that we all are able to be obedient in this new year of 2025, particularly me. And I also pray that that detour gets removed as soon as possible because I'm tired of it. I'm tired.